20 Most Cruel Actresses of Hollywood's Golden Age. The dazzling lights of Hollywood's Golden Age illuminated some of cinema's most unforgettable faces, but behind those flawless smiles and carefully crafted public images lurked some of entertainment's most notorious personalities. While their on-screen characters might have won our hearts, their off-screen behavior often shocked even their closest colleagues. From legendary feuds that shut down entire productions to bitter rivalries that lasted decades, these leading ladies were known for conduct that ranged from petty undermining to career-destroying vendettas. Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on Hollywood's most difficult diva, the women whose temperamental outbursts, jealous schemes, and cold-hearted tactics earned them reputations as the most feared figures in the film industry. This is the 20 Most Cruel Actresses of Hollywood's Golden Age. 20. Miriam Hopkins, the scene-stealing saboteur. Miriam Hopkins may not be as well remembered today as some of her contemporaries, but in Hollywood's Golden Age, she was infamous for her ruthless scene-stealing tactic and explosive jealousy toward co-stars. Director William Wyler, who worked with Hopkins on These Three and The Children's Hour, described her as terribly difficult and a real bitch.
You are making me sick.
Her reputation for sabotaging other actresses became so notorious that many top stars refused to work with her. Hopkins' most legendary feud was with Bette Davis, with whom she made 2 films. During the production of The Old Maid, Hopkins deliberately tried to upstage Davis by moving around during Davis's close-ups, forcing retakes and trying to distract from her co-star's performance. Davis later said of Hopkins, "Miriam used every trick in the book. I became fascinated watching her, and I learned a lot about what not to do when working with another actress." Hopkins was also known for demanding extensive rewrites to give herself more lines and better scenes, often at the expense of her co-stars. Her jealousy was so intense that when she believed a colleague was receiving more attention or better lighting, she would reportedly throw tantrums that could shut down production for hours. Studio executives kept hiring Hopkins despite her difficult behavior because of her undeniable talent, but her reputation for cruelty eventually contributed to her career decline as younger, more cooperative actresses were given preference for top roles. 19. Constance Bennett, the calculated class warrior. Constance Bennett was Hollywood royalty, who never let anyone forget it. The highest-paid actress in early 1930, Hollywood commanded $30,000 per week at her peak, and her attitude matched her salary. Bennett was notorious for her deliberate cruelty to crew members whom she considered beneath her notice. She would refuse to learn their names, instead snapping her fingers and pointing when she wanted something. One famous story involves Bennett stepping on a crew member's hand as he adjusted a cable, then walking away without acknowledgement, and he cried out in pain. Her special targets were younger actresses whom she viewed as threats. Joan Crawford, no stranger to difficult behavior herself, called Bennett the most conceited, self-centered actress ever to walk through a studio gate. Bennett's weapon of choice was her razor-sharp tongue. She regularly reduced young actresses to tears with devastatingly personal comments about their appearance, talent, or background. When a nervous newcomer flubbed a line while shooting with Bennett, she reportedly said, "I'm not surprised they dragged you in from whatever little town you came from, but I am surprised they expect you to speak." Her calculated cruelty extended to her family relationships as well. Her sisters, Joan and Barbara Bennett, both claimed Constance would deliberately try to sabotage their careers, including spreading negative rumors to studio executives and attempting to block them from roles. 18. Susan Hayward, the fiery-tempered redhead. Susan Hayward's explosive temper and vindictive streaks were as fiery as her famous red hair. Known for melodramatic roles that often won her critical acclaim, Hayward brought that same intense drama to her off-screen relationships. Crews dreaded working with Hayward due to her unpredictable outbursts. She would throw props, scream at directors, and deliberately sabotage takes if she felt slighted in any way. During the filming of I Want to Live, ironically the film that won her an Oscar, she reportedly had 3 different makeup artists fired for the tiniest perceived mistakes. Robert Mitchum, her co-star in several films, once said, "Working with Susan Hayward is like working in a cage with a tigress. You never know when she'll spring, but you're damn sure she will." Hayward was particularly cruel to supporting actresses whom she viewed as competitors for audience attention. She would deliberately speak softly during rehearsals, then project loudly during actual takes, throwing off the timing of other performers. She also insisted that no supporting actress could wear the color red on set, claiming it was her color and would distract from her performance. Her personal life was equally tumultuous. During her bitter divorce from actor Jess Barker, she restricted his access to their twin sons and reportedly told the boys their father didn't care about them. The custody battle was so vicious that at one point Barker attempted suicide. 17. Bette Davis, the calculated terror. While often remembered today as a feminist icon who fought the studio system, Bette Davis earned a well-documented reputation as one of Hollywood's most deliberately difficult stars, particularly toward actresses she viewed as rivals or incompetent. Davis's calculated cruelty was most evident in her treatment of co-stars she didn't respect. During filming of Beyond the Forest, she was so dismissive of her leading man, Joseph Cotten, that director King Vidor had to repeatedly ask her to stop rolling her eyes during Cotten's close-ups. On the set of All About Eve, Davis tormented a young Marilyn Monroe, whom she considered an untalented starlet. Davis would loudly criticize Monroe's acting ability and deliberately destroy takes by making mistakes whenever Monroe performed well, forcing the less experienced actress to repeat emotionally draining scenes. Even established stars weren't safe. When working with Susan Hayward on Where Love Has Gone, the set became a battleground. Davis would constantly question Hayward's interpretation of scenes in front of the entire crew, undermining her confidence and authority. Her most infamous act of on-set cruelty came during Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where her decades-long feud with Joan Crawford reached new heights. Davis reportedly installed a Coca-Cola machine on set, knowing Crawford's late husband had been the CEO of Pepsi, and during a scene that required her to drag Crawford, Davis actually kicked Crawford in the head, resulting in stitches. Davis defended her difficult behavior throughout her life, once famously stating, "Until you're known in my profession as a monster, you're not a star." She viewed kindness as weakness in Hollywood's competitive environment and weaponized her reputation for cruelty to maintain her position at the top. 16. Tallulah Bankhead, the equal opportunity tormentor. Tallulah Bankhead's acerbic wit and outrageous behavior made her a Hollywood legend, but also one of its most feared figures. Her cruelty was democratic. She targeted everyone from stagehands to leading men with her vicious barbs and deliberate humiliations. Bankhead's weapon of choice was public embarrassment. She would interrupt scenes to loudly criticize other actors' techniques or appearance, often using explicit language that shocked even hardened film crews. During rehearsals for Lifeboat, she reportedly reduced a young actor to tears by announcing to everyone, "Darling, your acting is so bad it would make a vulture vomit." Her deliberate upstaging techniques became legendary. She would move during other actors' close-ups, deliberately flub lines during their best takes, or suddenly change her performance style without warning, making it impossible for co-stars to react appropriately. Alfred Hitchcock, who directed Bankhead in Lifeboat, noted that she seemed to take particular delight in making life difficult for anyone she considered beneath her, which was virtually everyone. Crew members recalled her demanding impossible tasks and then berating them publicly when they couldn't comply. Bankhead's cruelty extended to her personal relationships. She would invite friends to parties, specifically to humiliate them with stories of their past failures or indiscretions. Many former friends spoke of Tallulah's torture sessions, evenings where she would get drunk and systematically insult each guest for her own amusement. 15. Vivien Leigh, the bipolar perfectionist. Vivien Leigh created two of cinema's most iconic characters in Scarlett O'Hara and Blanche DuBois, but her off-screen behavior was often as dramatic as these fictional roles. While her struggle with bipolar disorder explains some of her volatility, colleagues described a deliberate cruelty that went beyond mental health challenges. Leigh's perfectionistic standards led to notorious conflicts with directors and co-stars. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, she would deliberately sabotage scenes if she felt they weren't meeting her exacting standards, forcing exhausted cast and crew to repeat physically demanding sequences numerous times. Her treatment of supporting actresses was particularly harsh. Olivia de Havilland, who played Melanie in Gone with the Wind, recalled Leigh deliberately stepping on her hand during a scene where de Havilland was lying down, then smiling when de Havilland cried out in pain. Leigh reserved special venom for actresses she considered untalented. During production of Ship of Fools, she tormented Lee Marvin with constant criticism and would loudly mock his technique to other cast members. She also deliberately ruined takes when the camera was focused on anyone other than herself. Even her husband, Laurence Olivier, wasn't spared her calculated cruelty. During their tumultuous marriage, Leigh would deliberately flirt with other men in Olivier's presence, then create dramatic scenes accusing him of not loving her enough when he reacted. Friends described her as taking obvious pleasure in manipulating Olivier's emotions. While later understanding of Leigh's bipolar disorder has created more sympathy for her volatile behavior, contemporaries noted that her cruelty often seemed most most calculated when she was not experiencing a manic or depressive episode, suggesting that some of her difficult behavior was strategic rather than solely the result of mental illness. 14. Paulette Goddard, the Machiavellian manipulator. Paulette Goddard's beautiful face masked one of Hollywood's most calculating minds. Her rise from Ziegfeld girl to major star wasn't just due to her talent, it was the result of a ruthlessly strategic approach to relationships that left numerous casualties in its wake. Goddard's cruelty manifested differently than some of Hollywood's more publicly volatile stars. Rather than explosive outbursts, she specialized in behind-the-scenes manipulation and carefully planned social sabotage. She would befriend other actresses, gain their confidence, then use their secrets to undermine them with studio executives. During her marriage to Charlie Chaplin, Goddard deliberately isolated him from longtime friends and colleagues who might question her influence. Those who worked in the Chaplin household reported that she would intercept messages, forget to pass along important information, and gradually poison Chaplin against anyone she viewed as a threat to her control. Goddard was notorious for spreading damaging rumors about actresses competing for roles she wanted. When she and Katharine Hepburn were both considered for the female lead in The Philadelphia Story, mysterious stories about Hepburn being difficult to work with suddenly intensified in industry circles. While never proven, many believed Goddard was the source. Her treatment of domestic staff revealed her true nature when cameras weren't rolling. Former household employees described her as deliberately setting impossible standards, then berating them mercilessly when they failed to meet them. One former maid recalled Goddard dumping a drawer of perfectly folded lingerie onto the floor because one item was creased incorrectly, then forcing the maid to refold everything while she watched and criticized. 13. Loretta Young, the sanctimonious tyrant. Loretta Young's public image as a devout Catholic and moral exemplar stood in stark contrast to her treatment of those she worked with. Behind her pious exterior lurked what one director called the meanest woman in Hollywood when she doesn't get exactly what she wants. Young's particular brand of cruelty combined sanctimony with vindictiveness. She famously maintained a swear box on her sets, fining anyone who used profanity, but collected fines selectively, targeting people she disliked while ignoring violations from those she favored. The money supposedly went to charity, but several production assistants claimed Young simply pocketed it. Her treatment of younger actresses was especially harsh. Young would invite inexperienced actresses to her dressing room, ostensibly to offer guidance, then deliberately give them advice that would damage their performances or reputations. She once told a young starlet to speak up and project more during a quiet dramatic scene, which resulted in the director berating the newcomer for overacting. Young's cruelty extended to family matters. When her daughter Judy Lewis, conceived out of wedlock with Clark Gable but presented to the world as adopted, began questioning her parentage, Young responded with emotional manipulation and gaslighting, refusing to acknowledge the truth even as Judy recognized her resemblance to Gable. Young maintained this cruel deception for decades, denying her daughter knowledge of her own identity. On film sets, Young was known for demanding extensive special treatment while simultaneously preaching humility to others. She would insist on elaborate accommodations, then criticize others for materialistic focus. One crew member recalled Young having a grip fired for bringing her regular rather than distilled water, then giving a lecture about Christian forgiveness at the wrap party. This combination of moral superiority and behind-the-scenes cruelty made Young particularly despised in Hollywood circles. As one contemporary noted, at least with someone like Bette Davis, you knew exactly where you stood. Loretta would knife you in the back and then pray for your soul. 12. Veronica Lake, the self-destructive tornado. Veronica Lake's iconic peekaboo hairstyle and sultry persona made her one of the most recognizable stars of the 1940s, but her behind-the-scenes behavior earned her the nickname the bitch with the peekaboo bangs among industry insiders. Lake's cruelty often stemmed from her alcoholism and untreated mental health issues, but even accounting for these challenges, colleagues described a deliberate meanness that went beyond her personal demons. She would memorize co-workers' insecurities and vulnerabilities, then exploit them publicly when she felt threatened or simply bored. During the filming of This Gun for Hire with Alan Ladd, Lake discovered that Ladd was sensitive about his 5 feet 6 inches height. She proceeded to wear unnecessarily high heels on set and make constant references to his stature, even though they were supposed to be building romantic chemistry on screen. Crew members recalled Ladd looking visibly distressed by her taunting. Lake reserved particular venom for female co-stars. Actress Freddie Bartholomew recalled Lake deliberately ruining her close-ups by making distracting movements off camera or suddenly changing the timing of her dialogue to throw off Bartholomew's performance. When Bartholomew asked her to stop, Lake reportedly replied, "Learn to act through it or get out of the business." Her cruelty toward crew members became legendary. She would deliberately spill coffee on costumes to force force wardrobe staff to work overtime, knowing they wouldn't be compensated for the extra hours. During night shoots, she would disappear to her trailer for hours, knowing that every minute of delay cost the production money and kept exhausted crew members from going home. Even at the height of her fame, directors increasingly refused to work with Lake despite her box office appeal. Preston Sturgis, who directed her in Sullivan's Travels, later said, "Life's too short to direct Veronica Lake." Her career decline came quickly, hastened by her reputation for unnecessary cruelty that made even the most patient filmmakers unwilling to endure her presence on set. 11. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the status-obsessed socialite. Zsa Zsa Gabor's fame derived more from her flamboyant personality and 9 marriages than her acting career, but her reputation for calculated cruelty made her one of Hollywood's most feared social figures for decades. Gabor's particular brand of cruelty focused on social status and class distinctions. She would invite people from different social circles to the same event, then deliberately highlight their differences in ways designed to humiliate those she considered inferior. At one infamous dinner party, she seated a plumber who was married to a minor actress next to a countess, then spent the evening making comments about how fascinating it was to see different classes attempt to converse. Her treatment of household staff was especially notorious. Former employees described rituals of humiliation, including forcing staff to stand perfectly still for inspection before events. One butler recalled being made to change his uniform 4 times because Gabor claimed she could smell poverty on the fabric. Gabor's cruelty toward perceived rivals was legendary. When a younger, beautiful actress moved into her neighborhood, Gabor began a campaign of harassment that included calling noise complaints to police, spreading rumors of the woman's mental instability among industry figures, and even attempting to have the woman's dog taken away by animal control on false claims of neglect. Perhaps most calculating was Gabor's treatment of her numerous husbands and lovers. She would deliberately flirt with other men in front of her current partner, then create dramatic scenes if they objected or responded in kind. Several ex-husbands described systematic emotional abuse, with Gabor deliberately undermining their self-esteem and then mocking their weakness. Despite her difficult reputation, Gabor maintained her position in Hollywood society through strategic manipulation of the press and careful cultivation of powerful friends. She understood that in Hollywood's social hierarchy, being entertainingly cruel could itself become a form of currency, and she spent this currency freely throughout her long life. 10. June Allyson, the two-faced terror. June. Allyson cultivated one of Hollywood's greatest disconnects between public image and private reality. While audiences adored her as the wholesome girl next door, those who worked with her encountered what director David Miller called the most skillfully cruel woman I've ever met in the film business. Allyson's technique involved maintaining her sweet persona in public settings while engaging in psychological warfare behind closed doors. Film crews recalled her smiling warmly for publicity photos, then turning to verbally eviscerate support staff the moment cameras stopped rolling, always careful that her outbursts remained private enough to protect her valuable public image. Her targeted cruelty toward competing actresses became legendary. When working with younger female co-stars, Allyson would offer seemingly friendly advice about makeup, costumes, or performance choices, all deliberately designed to make them look worse on camera or alienate the director. Allyson's husband, actor-director Dick Powell, bore the brunt of her private cruelty. Friends described witnessing shocking emotional abuse when the couple thought they were alone, with Powell sometimes emerging from private conversations with Allyson looking shell-shocked. Perhaps most calculating was Allyson's approach to professional rivals. She maintained detailed information about other actresses' weaknesses, insecurities, and past mistakes. Several promising careers stalled after crossing paths with Allyson, though she maintained plausible deniability about her involvement. 9. Ginger Rogers, The Perfectionist's Revenge. While forever linked with Fred Astaire in the public imagination, Ginger Rogers' off-screen reputation was far removed from her elegant on-screen persona. Those who worked with her described a coldly calculating woman whose perfectionism manifested as deliberate cruelty toward anyone she felt was performing below her exacting standards. Rogers' most consistent targets were dancers and choreographers. She would deliberately humiliate core dancers who made minor mistakes. Numerous dancers recalled breaking down in tears after Rogers' methodical public dissections of their technique. Her cruelty extended to co-stars who received positive attention. Rogers reserved particular venom for costume and makeup makeup staff. She would demand complex changes minutes before shooting, knowing they were impossible to execute in the available time, then loudly berate the staff for incompetence when they couldn't meet her demands. One makeup artist recalled Rogers deliberately washing off her completed makeup just before a scene, then complaining to producers about delays caused by the makeup department. Even Fred Astaire, known for his professionalism and generally good relationships with co-stars, eventually requested not to work with Rogers again, despite their immense popularity as a duo. While publicly diplomatic, privately Astaire told friends that Rogers' treatment of crew members and supporting cast had become too difficult to witness. Rogers justified her behavior as necessary perfectionism, once telling a producer, "Mediocrity should be painful. I'm just making sure everyone feels the appropriate amount of pain." This calculated approach to cruelty, framed as professional standards rather than personal meanness, allowed Rogers to maintain her position while creating an atmosphere of fear that many colleagues never forgot. 8. Mary Astor, the diary deployer. Mary Astor is remembered for her Oscar-winning performance in The Maltese Falcon, but in Hollywood circles, she was known for wielding secrets as weapons and destroying reputations with surgical precision. Astor became infamous for keeping detailed diaries of her affairs and the private confessions of friends, then strategically deploying this information when it benefited her. While her own diary became public during a custody battle, revealing affairs with numerous prominent men, few knew that Astor maintained separate collection diaries about others, which she used as leverage throughout her career. Astor would cultivate close relationships with other actresses, presenting herself as a confidant during vulnerable moments. Once she had collected sufficient compromising information, she would begin a subtle campaign of control, including casual references to their secrets in public settings, just enough to remind them of her power without explicitly revealing anything. When actress Margaret Sullivan began being considered for roles Astor wanted, mysterious rumors about Sullivan's private life began circulating in Hollywood. While never proven, many believed Astor was behind the Whisper campaign, using information gathered during their previous friendship. Astor's treatment of domestic staff revealed her everyday cruelty. One former maid recalled Astor making her rewash dishes 3 times because she claimed she could see microscopic spots that no one else could detect. Even Astor's own daughter, Marilyn Hawley, eventually cut contact with her mother, citing years of emotional manipulation and control. Hawley later described growing up with a mother who collected people's weaknesses the way others collect stamps, and enjoyed watching people squirm when she hinted at what she knew about them. 7. Gene Tierney, The Beautiful Nightmare. Gene Tierney's extraordinary beauty and talent in films like Laura and Leave Her to Heaven masked what co-workers described as the most unpredictable and deliberately vicious woman in Hollywood. While Tierney's later diagnosed bipolar disorder explains some of her volatility, colleagues consistently described calculated cruelty that went beyond mental health challenges. She would identify others' insecurities with remarkable precision, then exploit them in public settings designed to cause maximum humiliation. Tierney's treatment of supporting actresses was particularly brutal. If she felt another woman might draw attention away from her, she would deploy a systematic campaign of undermining. Her relationships with directors were equally fraught. When Otto Preminger suggested a different approach to a scene in Laura, Tierney began a Whisper campaign suggesting he was behaving inappropriately toward female cast members. The rumors nearly derailed production until their false nature was established. Perhaps most disturbing was Tierney's treatment of her daughter Daria, who was born with severe disabilities after Tierney was exposed to rubella during pregnancy. While Tierney publicly presented as a devoted mother, private accounts suggest she often blamed the child for damaging her figure and career, sometimes leaving Daria with caregivers for months without visits. While Tierney's mental health struggles have created more sympathetic modern assessments of her behavior, contemporaries noted that her cruelty often seemed most calculated during her stable periods, suggesting that some of her difficult behavior was strategic rather than solely the result of bipolar disorder. 6. Marlene Dietrich, the Teutonic Terror. Marlene Dietrich's legendary status as a Hollywood icon and later anti-Nazi activist has somewhat obscured her reputation as one of the industry's most calculatingly cruel figures, both on set and in her personal relationships. Dietrich's perfectionism manifested as deliberate humiliation of those she considered professionally inferior. She would halt production to publicly criticize makeup artists, costume designers, or lighting technicians, often reducing them to tears before an entire crew. Her tirades weren't spontaneous outbursts, but methodical dissections designed to establish total dominance over the production environment. Her treatment of romantic partners, both male and female, revealed a pattern of emotional sadism. Multiple lovers described Dietrich deliberately cultivating their emotional dependence, then suddenly withdrawing affection or publicly flirting with others to create psychological distress. When they reacted with hurt, she would mock their neediness and lack of sophistication. Dietrich reserved particular cruelty for young actresses she perceived as potential rivals. When a beautiful newcomer was cast in a supporting role on Witness for the Prosecution, Dietrich began a campaign of undermining that included deliberately sabotaging the actress's lighting during shared scenes and spreading rumors about unprofessional behavior to the director. Her relationships with her daughter Maria and husband Rudolf Sieber were characterized by calculated manipulation. Dietrich would lavish attention on Maria, then suddenly withdraw it if her daughter showed any independence. She maintained a decades-long marriage to Sieber while flaunting her numerous affairs, but would become enraged if he showed interest in other women. 5. Barbara Stanwyck, the self-made survivor. Barbara Stanwyck's rise from poverty to Hollywood royalty created one of the industry's most complex personalities. While renowned for her professionalism and work ethic, those who crossed her discovered what director Cecil B. DeMille called the most precisely vengeful woman I've ever encountered. Unlike stars born to privilege, Stanwyck's cruelty stemmed from a survival instinct developed during her brutal childhood in foster care. She viewed Hollywood as a zero-sum game where others' success directly threatened her own, leading to calculated behaviors designed to eliminate competition. Stanwyck's method involved identifying others' professional vulnerabilities with uncanny accuracy, then exploiting them systematically. When a younger actress was cast alongside her in Double Indemnity, Stanwyck learned of her severe anxiety about memorizing lines. Rather than helping the newcomer, Stanwyck began requesting script changes minutes before their scenes together, knowing the last-minute adjustments would trigger her co-star's anxiety and lead to a poor performance. Her treatment of directors who questioned her choices became legendary. Rather than direct confrontation, Stanwyck would deploy what one filmmaker called psychological guerrilla warfare, subtly undermining their authority with other cast members, creating production delays through misunderstandings, and sometimes gathering compromising information to use as leverage. 4. Ethel Barrymore, the Theatre Royal's Revenge. As a member of America's most distinguished theatrical family, Ethel Barrymore brought to Hollywood not just exceptional talent, but what colleagues called the most refined cruelty in the business, an aristocratic approach to psychological warfare that left lasting scars. Unlike stars who rose from nothing, Barrymore's cruelty stemmed from a sense of theatrical royalty. She viewed most Hollywood actors as inherently inferior to those with stage training, and her methodical humiliation of film actors often focused on their perceived technical deficiencies. Barrymore would deliberately undermine less experienced actors through a technique contemporaries called the royal displacement. During rehearsals, she would practice one approach to a scene, establishing a rhythm her co-stars adjusted to. Then, during actual filming, she would completely change her timing, emotional level, and sometimes even rephrase her dialogue, making their carefully practiced responses appear awkward or amateurish. Her treatment of directors without theatrical backgrounds was particularly calculated. Rather than open confrontation, she would publicly defer to their authority while simultaneously undermining it through subtle facial expressions or slight pauses that communicated her disdain to the entire set. One director recalled, "She could make you question your entire career with just a raised eyebrow." Barrymore reserved special cruelty for younger actresses from common backgrounds who showed promise. She would initially take them under her wing, offering seemingly supportive advice that actually undermined their confidence or pushed them toward choices that would damage their careers. 3. Jean Arthur, the pathological perfectionist. Jean Arthur's screen persona as the warm, funny girl with the distinctive voice stands in stark contrast to what director Frank Capra called the most genuinely difficult human being I ever worked with. Arthur's extreme anxiety and pathological perfectionism manifested as systematic cruelty toward those she felt were compromising her performances. Unlike stars whose difficult behavior stemmed from ego, Arthur's came from a crippling fear of imperfection that she projected onto others through calculated control mechanisms. Her treatment of supporting actors became notorious in Hollywood. If she felt someone might draw focus from her performance, she would deploy a methodical campaign of undermining, including deliberately throwing off their timing, making last-minute script change requests, or even sabotaging their costumes or makeup. One actor recalled Arthur accidentally spilling coffee on his costume just before a crucial scene, necessitating a delay that left him anxious and unfocused. Arthur's relationship with crew members revealed her everyday cruelty. She would make impossible demands of lighting technicians, then berate them publicly when they couldn't achieve effects that were technically unfeasible. Makeup artists reported being made to redo her makeup dozens of times, while Arthur criticized their skills and intelligence. 2. Joan Crawford, the calculated career destroyer. Joan Crawford's reputation for cruelty has become Hollywood legend, amplified by her daughter Christina's memoir, Mommy Dearest. Yet beyond the wire hanger incidents and domestic abuse lies a pattern of calculated professional cruelty that made Crawford one of the most feared women in the industry for decades. Crawford's approach to rivals was systematic and devastating. When she perceived another actress as a threat, she would deploy a comprehensive strategy that began with gathering information through her network of informants, then progressed to a coordinated campaign of professional sabotage. She became known for accepting roles in films specifically to block younger actresses from career-making opportunities. Her treatment of co-stars who received positive attention became legendary. During filming of The Women, Crawford deliberately stepped on Norma Shearer's lines, moved during Shearer's close-ups to ruin takes, and engaged in a whisper campaign suggesting Shearer was having difficulty remembering her dialogue. Similar tactics were deployed against Faye Dunaway decades later on the set of Mommy Dearest. Ironically, during the production of a film about Crawford's abusive behavior. Crawford reserved particular cruelty for actresses she mentored. She would invite promising newcomers to her home, lavishing them with advice and seemingly supportive guidance. Once she gained their trust, the manipulation began. Advice designed to damage their careers, introductions to people who would exploit them, and the collection of compromising information to use as future leverage. 1. Judy Garland, the Damage Destroyer. Judy Garland's tragic life story, from MGM's abusive treatment of her as a child star to her struggles with addiction and eventual early death, has created a posthumous image of Garland as primarily a victim of Hollywood's cruelty. This narrative, while partially true, overshadows what those who worked closely with her described as the most devastatingly cruel woman in an industry known for cruelty. Garland's difficult behavior was inextricably linked to her traumatic experiences and substance abuse issues. However, colleagues consistently described calculated cruelty that went beyond these challenges, particularly toward those she perceived as having the normal childhood and stable mental health that she had been denied. Her treatment of other performers revealed a pattern of deliberate sabotage. If another singer or actress received positive attention, Garland would deploy what co-star Margaret Hamilton called psychological warfare, deliberately upstaging them during performances, spreading rumors about unprofessional behavior, or using her considerable influence to have their roles reduced. Garland reserved particular venom for young performers who reminded her of her younger self. When introduced to newcomers with similar backgrounds, she would initially appear supportive, then systematically undermine their confidence through casual comments about their weight, talent, or prospects in the industry. Several promising careers stalled after encountering Garland's targeted cruelty. Her personal relationships followed patterns of extreme emotional manipulation. Multiple husbands and lovers described systematic abuse, including public humiliation, deliberate triggering of their insecurities, and the use of suicide threats as a control mechanism. Sid Luft, her third husband, wrote that Garland could make you feel like the most worthless human being on earth with just a few carefully chosen words. If you found this glimpse into Hollywood's darker history interesting, hit subscribe and the notification bell to make sure you never miss our upcoming videos on film history's untold stories. Let us know in the comments which star's behavior surprised you the most, and share this video with anyone who loves discovering the complicated truth behind Hollywood's golden facade. Thanks for watching.